Yeah, that worked. That worked. So
There it is. Okay, good. So now I need to make sure all that other stuff is still working.
Turn share screen on, and I will prompt you to co-host. Should be set there.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And I'm going to test the PowerPoint and all that again one more time, just to make sure.
Make sure we're still working.
Yep.
Okay.
How's that?
Very good.
Okay, except I'm on the wrong slide. So let me go back a slide. How's that?
That looks good too.
Okie doke. So I'm going to stop sharing. And okay, I think everything should be in order.
I'm going to fill my water jug up real quick, and then,
Okay.
then I'll turn it on when I come
Oh,
back.
and the other thing, Matt, I was going to say, if this goes past 8, I might say that we have a 5-minute break because I'm going to have a bathroom break or something at some point. So
That's fair.
we'll just let everybody know that we may have to turn it off for 5 minutes and come back.
Okay, that'll work.
Or somebody else can take notes for a while. Hey, Matt, can you rename yourself so your name is on the screen?
Yep, good catch. Oh, I seem to catch that way late.
Apparently it won't let me do it, but you can. I guess because you're the host.
Shoot, I hate that.
Here to the desktop, Matt, too, as a
Okay,
backup.
all righty. You're muted again.
Are you going to take notes as we go, Leslie?
Yeah.
Great. Great.
Yep.
Hi, Leah. Hello, Frank. How are you both? And the attendees are coming on. We have 30 so far. People's names keep moving, or I'd go grab the commissioners and turn on. Commissioners, I've invited as panelists for the time being. So hopefully they pop on here in a couple of seconds.
Auto where a shooter opened fire at a grocery store earlier this afternoon, just before 3 p.m. local time.
Are we live
Police
yet?
have not yet released any information.
Okay.
I just muted you.
Multiple victims.
I will be in and out this evening. I'm monitoring closely the events in Boulder because it's impacting me. So I will be here, but listening mostly, but I will be there. And just let me know. So thanks.
Okay, we're just going to ask commissioners to do a brief introduction of themselves. So
Carmen Best, and it looks like we may have this press conference in a second.
all right. It looks like we have 41 attendees that have logged on, and we have our panelists that are turned on right now. So Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to tonight's meeting regarding oil and gas regulations in Larimer County. And we're going through an updating process, and we're glad you could join us and participate. Tonight, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to have a brief presentation from Leslie Ellis, the Community Development Director, brief introductions by the commissioners, and then Matt Sura, our consulting attorney, will have a brief presentation, and then I'll wrap up with a minor presentation. And then we'll leave the rest of the meeting to the public to talk and tell us what their thoughts are, and see where that takes us this evening. We will be taking meeting notes live, so you'll be able to see that we're documenting what's going on and keeping track of what you guys have to say. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Ellis, and she'll kind of run us through the first part of the meeting, and maybe she'll introduce the commissioners as well.
Thanks, Matt. So yes, we'll start with introductions, and I'm Leslie Ellis, the Community Development Director. We'll have the commissioners go ahead and introduce yourselves, and if you'd like to say a few words to our attendees who are also watching, that would be great. Thank you. And then we'll go to staff.
Thank you, Leslie. John Kafalos, Larimer County Commissioner, District 1 Board Chair. I just want to say how important it is that the public be involved in this process of updating our oil and gas regulations. And it's really important for us to hear all perspectives and receive all public input. Thanks. Thank you very much for being here. And actually, Leslie and colleagues, could we just take, I don't know, 30 seconds to pause because of the shooting incident that we're just hearing about from the city of Boulder. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah. Thank you. For folks who may not be aware, the story I'm sure is unfolding, but there apparently was an active shooter at a King Soopers in Boulder, Table Mesa Drive, starting around 3 o'clock this afternoon. And I'm sure we'll hear more about this as the night goes on. Thanks, Leslie. I'm done.
Hello, everyone. I'm Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shag McNally from District 3, and I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It's important to have public's engagement in this important process, and I want to thank staff for their work and allowing us to have these, organizing these public events and public information gathering, and look forward to hearing Matt Sura's conversation. I will be listening mostly tonight. My son actually was in that store right before the shooting happened, and I just got a text a little while ago from him, so I'm still kind of rattled about that, but he's coming up here to visit with me, so, or maybe we'll go down there, I'm not sure, but so I will be here, but I just wanted to thank John for giving us a moment to think about those victims, and we send our thoughts to all those folks impacted and the elected officials in Boulder County. So anyway, I want to appreciate everyone being here tonight, and again, thanks to staff, and I will, if you'll see me going in and out, that's why. So thank you.
We can't hear you, Commissioner Stevens.
No. You might want to, let me see if I can click on you and see if it mute and unmute. Can you unmute yourself now? Try it.
No. Why don't we come back to you in a minute? It's possible that your settings may need to be adjusted, and we'll go to staff in the meantime while you're doing that. So Lori, are you on? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Leslie. I was having trouble getting to the mute. I'm Lori Cadridge. Good evening, everyone. And I'm the Director for Community Planning and Infrastructure Resources, and work closely with Matt and Leslie on our oil and gas regulations.
Thank you. Frank?
Hi, I'm Frank Haug from the County Attorney's Office. And I work closely on the oil and gas matters here for the county.
And Leah.
Hi, Leah Schneider with the Environmental Health Department, acting as a liaison with the Health Department and the Planning Department.
Thank you. And then our consultant, excuse me, Matt Sura.
Yes, Matt Suri here, also from the Boulder area and a little bit rattled by what I'm seeing as well. Thanks so much for the moment of silence and sending good thoughts to folks that are involved in that.
Thank
Any
you.
more luck, Commissioner Stevens? No. You could try to log out and log on, and that would be
Yeah.
the next best thing.
Okay. All right, thank you. And we'll come back to her if she has better luck here shortly. So with that, I think I will pull up some of the introductory slides that we will start with tonight. And I just have a handful of slides to remind folks or let people know, if you haven't been part of this so far, what the proposed schedule is and the process moving forward. So let me go ahead and share that screen. Are you able to see that, Matt?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So moving right along. Okay, how about that?
Yes.
Okay, so for everybody watching, the purpose of our meeting this evening is to take the next step of sharing some information about the updated schedule for the project. The last meeting we had with the public was back on March 4th, and we've had a conversation since then with the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners on the 10th. And so we've continued to adjust the schedule a bit. We are going to share tonight, we'll start to get into some of the substance. So some of the comparative analysis of our regulations with state standards and some other jurisdictions that you'll hear about. And then Matt Lafferty will talk to you about the current review procedures and what we do in Larimer County. We'd like to take a little bit of time too to set the stage for the April 8th meeting. And then we will have time tonight to hear input from all of you who are participating. So we do hope that you all participate. We have about 45 people on right now, and I was noting who's on here. There's a number of ways that you can contribute to this meeting. So you can either write comments in the chat box. You can send questions. We won't necessarily be able to answer all the questions tonight, but we'll do our best to either get to them verbally or follow up on questions in the next few weeks. If you would like to make a verbal comment, please raise your hand in the Zoom. And if you could limit your first comment to about 3 minutes so that we can go through a round of everybody and give anybody who's interested in speaking a chance to do so. And then we'll come back to you. This isn't a public hearing where you only get one chance, but we just want to make sure there's opportunity for everybody who wants to say something to have that opportunity. You can also participate outside this meeting. You can send your comments or ideas to these different spots noted on the slide here. I will be taking notes while people speak, and we'll note down the names. We're also recording this session, so there's different opportunities to keep track of what happens and what's said and what kind of feedback we get. We'd ask that you recognize that this is a public discussion. We're not here to debate with each other tonight. We'd ask that you keep it civil. If we go past 8 o'clock, we might take a short break so that we can get some water refills and that kind of thing. And so we'll unmute you when it's your turn to speak, and we'll keep track of who's in line next to speak when we get to that part of the meeting. This is a repeat slide from the last meeting, just for anybody who's new to this, but we're working on updating our oil and gas regulations to make sure that they align with or exceed the recently adopted COGCC regulations. And so we're doing a lot of work and analysis around that, and lots of opportunities for public engagement for the next few months. We want to make sure we end up with the best standards that we can that are fitting for Larimer County, that address a number of these issues that you see here on the slide. There is a timeline that's been updated a few times on the project webpage, and you can see from that, if you go to that, and I'll give you the webpage here in just a moment, but there's multiple opportunities to be involved, including this one. The next event is on April 8th and so on, and we'll continue this process all the way through July. The next meeting will dig into some more details around land use and location topics. The meeting after that will dig into environmental type standards, public health, welfare, and the meeting after that in May will address compliance, fees, financial assurances, and so on, and any other topics that we haven't had a chance to do. And then if we're ready, we'll put all those pieces together into a public draft in late May. As Matt Lafferty at the last meeting described it, it's kind of a bunch of puzzle pieces that will provide drafts at each stage along the way and an opportunity to provide feedback on the options and the choices, and then we'll put them all together into a public draft in the May timeframe. So that's what's planned. This is where you can find more information. If you go to that webpage, you can sign up for alerts or send comments and get information about schedules and so on. So with that, I will pass it off to Matt Sura, who's going to share his information about the analysis that he prepared. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to share my screen, and you should be able to see that at this point. What you're looking at here is 2019 production in the state of Colorado, and these are the top 10 or 11 counties production numbers from those counties for 2019. And I use 2019 because 2020 was an anomaly, as we all know. 2019 was probably the last best case. And you'll see here in annual oil sales, Larimer County is right around the middle, in 6th in production, and in natural gas sales, Larimer County was 11th in the state of Colorado. And I say this because it's important to put this in context. You look at these counties, starting with Weld at the top, both in gas and in oil, Adams, Rio Blanco, Arapahoe, Jackson, Larimer, Garfield, Cheyenne, Lincoln, and Broomfield. Of those top 10 in oil production, Larimer County is easily the third strongest regulations, of those 10. And the same goes over here. In fact, I would put third here as well, just behind Weld and Adams. Oil and gas regulation at the county level, at local government level, is relatively new in the state of Colorado, and that's due to the fact that prior to 2019, in Senate Bill 181, local governments were really preempted from doing a lot of regulation of oil and gas. So while I know that there is some feeling of urgency among the public, and we are certainly moving as fast as we can. We've got a moratorium in place. We recognize that this is something that is pretty new to Colorado generally, and Larimer County, for what it's done already, is among some of the strongest regulations in the state. So this is an analysis I did only looking at Boulder County and Commerce City, comparison to the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission and Larimer County. And I used Commerce City and Boulder County because they are the first two local governments to have passed regulations since the new mission change regulations were passed at the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission. And I'm just going to go into a little bit of detail as to what we found in areas that the Larimer County regulations currently exceed Colorado Gas Conservation Commission rules. I think public notice is of note. Colorado Gas Conservation Commission requires that they publicly notice folks out to 2,000 feet of proposed oil and gas location, and Larimer County has that public notice going out to 2640 or a half a mile. Meeting with neighbors is not required at the Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission, and that is in Larimer County. The requirement to attempt use best efforts to hook up to electric equipment is not a requirement at the Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission. It is in Larimer County. Fencing, traffic management, and liquid pipeline requirement. And I think it's important to say that liquid pipeline requirement is required, if at all possible, in Larimer County for oil and for water, particularly for produced water in this case. The Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission does have a requirement that has banned flaring, is something that I mentioned last time, and that is natural gas has to be piped, and you can't have an oil and gas well that is producing natural gas for very long, more than a month, without connecting to a gas pipeline. And wildlife protections. Larimer County has strong wildlife protections for all development within the county. Areas that are equivalent to Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission rules, baseline water monitoring. These are areas that the Larimer County regulations really just embraced what was currently Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission rules at the time, and those rules had since not really changed during the mission change rulemaking. Air quality mitigation, local government inspection, traffic management, dust mitigation, visual mitigation, emergency response, financial assurance, and reverse setbacks or reciprocal setbacks. And areas that are less strict than the Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission rules, and I'm going to go into some detail on these issues, are setbacks from homes, alternative location analysis, noise standards, planning documents, and enforcement. Now, setbacks from homes is something that certainly gets a lot of airplay and is very important. But I think that a lot of folks misunderstand what was passed at the Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission. The Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission were very reluctant to pass strong, or what they considered strong setbacks for homes, but did pass strong setbacks for schools. So you've got a 2,000-foot setback from school facilities that is both from current and future school facilities that is unwaivable. This is considered a very strong setback. They also have a strong setback of 500 feet from homes that is only waivable by the people who would be affected, those people that are living in the homes or homeowners that would be within that 500 feet. They have the ability to waive that requirement of that 500-foot setback, but otherwise it's going to be enforceable. It's the 500 to 2,000-foot setback from homes that I think is cause for a little bit of a misunderstanding from the public. There are some that would say that Colorado Gas Conservation Commission embraced a 2,000-foot setback, and I think that there's a 2,000-foot setback presumption from the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission, but there are ways to get between 2,000 feet and 500 feet from a home, and that is that they consider best management practices, size and duration of proposed oil and gas operations, local government's disposition, local government's decision, and results of an alternative location analysis, location in relationship to infrastructure, particularly pipelines, oil pipelines, and outreach efforts to affected residents. Those are the types of issues that the full Colorado Gas Conservation Commission will consider when they're looking at whether or not to approve a location that is less than 2,000 feet, between 500 feet and 2,000 feet. And they're going to be looking at whether or not those protections are substantially equivalent to the protections that they would have, those residents would have, if the location was 2,000 feet away. So again, that's a high bar and I think a strict standard. However, the commission does believe that they are going to be allowing for some development, oil and gas development, less than 2,000 feet. And this is how these are the conditions that they look at. One of the tools that the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission really embraced that has been used in some local governments on the Front Range over the last few years is the idea of an alternative location analysis. This is if there is an oil and gas facility that is going to be adverse to some existing land uses, or could possibly be in conflict with some of those existing land uses, then some local governments had put forward this idea of an alternative location analysis, essentially saying to the oil and gas industry, prove to us that you've done your homework. Prove to us that this is the best location that you can find. Not that it was just the first location that you could find, or the cheapest location you could find, or that would make you the most income, but taking all of those issues, those surface issues into account, what is the best location that's going to be least intrusive to existing land uses? And that's what an alternative location analysis requires. It is required by the Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission anytime there's a location that is proposed within 2,000 feet of a building, of a home, that is. A location that is, anytime it's within 2,640 feet, that is a half a mile of a public water supply system. And a public water supply system is, something that is going to either a well or a surface location that is servicing 16 or more full-time homes within 2,000 feet of a municipal or county boundary. And that takes a little bit of explanation, I think, because there are a lot of places that are within 2,000 feet of a municipality or any sort of county boundary. The reason is that they didn't want the oil and gas industry to be doing any jurisdiction shopping. That is, either locating in an area where they would have less restrictions, or that they would pay less taxes, or and ultimately being just outside, say, a city, a municipality, and the municipal residents would be experiencing all the impacts, but they wouldn't have any of the protections of their local government and those local government regulations. So those get special consideration. Also, if they're in a floodplain, if they're in a high priority habitat, or where there is a surface owner protection bond. And the surface owner protection bond means that, which is allowed by statute, if the oil and gas industry tries to negotiate a surface use agreement to set up an oil and gas operation on someone's property, and that surface owner is not willing to give them a surface use agreement, the law allows for the industry to bond on, to post a very small bond, and to be able to drill on their property without their permission. This is very rare, because most of the time the oil and gas industry is able to come to an agreement with local, with surface owners. But in the case where they can't, and they're going to post a surface owner bond, they have to prove that that's really the only place that they can drill before they're allowed to drill there. And that's, again, the purpose of alternative location analysis is to find the best location possible. Noise standards. This is something that is one of the biggest issues for oil and gas development, and one of the biggest complaints that residents that live near oil and gas development, active oil and gas development, are concerned about is the amount of industrial noise that come from these facilities, particularly during drilling and hydraulic fracturing or completion operations. And the Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission lowered the maximum A scale noise that is allowable during the drilling and hydraulic fracturing. And they also adopted a noise standard for the first time for C scale noise, which is that low frequency kind of bass noise that you can feel as much as hear. It's almost a pressure. And it is also a concern of people who are living near oil and gas development, and one of the major complaints. Previously, the Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission did not have a requirement for C-scale noise, and now they do. Again, this would be something that certainly Larimer County is going to look to adopt, at least the requirements that are in the Cunningham Gas Conservation Commission regulations. Planning documents. Larimer County has far more planning requirements than most local governments, and that's based on the fact that they have requirements found in two different areas. They're certainly in the land use code in section 17, which is the oil and gas section, but also in section 8, standards for all development. There are additional plans for wildlife, for lighting, noise, that apply to all development that are located in section 8. And then again, in the oil and gas section, there were additional plans on top of that. The Oil and Gas Conservation Commission typically did not have that many requirements, but have since really embraced the idea that they would like to get a lot of this information up front, and now have 20 separate plans that are required of the oil and gas industry. And there are a number of these plans that I believe make a lot of sense to incorporate into local government regulations based on the fact that the oil and gas industry is going to do them anyway. It's very clear in the law, in the statute, and the way that the statute is being interpreted by the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, that oil and gas companies have to follow both local, state, and possibly federal regulations if it's on federal land. And so the local regulations and the state regulations, the local government can put them through their paces and require a certain number of plans. The Oil and Gas Conservation Commission can require a certain number of plans. I believe that it doesn't make sense for those plans to not be consistent. Certainly if the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is requiring a topsoil protection plan, as an example, it doesn't cause any additional work for that same plan to be required at the local level. And that includes an alternative location analysis, cumulative impacts plan, a community outreach plan, which I'll come back to in a minute, topsoil protection plan, operations safety management plan, a flood shut-in plan, and interim reclamation plan. These are plans that currently don't exist at the county level, but certainly are at the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. And I think that we should take a hard look as to whether or not we would want to incorporate these plans into the county planning process. The community outreach plan, I wanted to come back to because it's only required at the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission if the proposed location was within 2,000 feet of a home or a school in a disproportionately impacted community. And disproportionately impacted community is going to be a community that there were a certain percentage of people speak a language other than English, or they fall into a socioeconomic category that is defined by the EPA. I feel like, and what I have recommended to some of my other local government clients, is that a community outreach plan is just good, a good idea for any oil and gas development. The idea that you are going to have an ability to be able to communicate with your neighbors in the event that something has gone wrong, or that something's gone right, or that you're just going to be doing some routine maintenance, just to let people know that you're going to be out there and there's going to be a rig, but it's not going to cause any noise, or that it's just going to be there for a day, and so that there's no cause for alarm. Commerce City also has some requirements as well, in the form of a risk management plan and an emergency resource mobilization or cash plan. These risk management plans are a good idea, and it's just more detail than an emergency response plan. It's actually looking at what are the enumerated risks of any oil and gas development, and how are you going to approach each one of those independently and minimize those risks. Again, this is a plan that is being required in other jurisdictions, and something we might look at here in Larimer County. An emergency resource mobilization plan is something that really came out of Weld County. One of the things that Weld County has been doing for years is requiring the operators in that area, and they've got a lot of them, there's a lot of oil and gas development, as we know, but requiring them to communicate with one another and with emergency response systems to ensure that those emergency responders have the resources necessary to be able to respond to an oil and gas fire. Oil and gas fires have to be fought differently than your traditional fire. For one, water often isn't the first response. It's more of a foam fire that you would fight with foam. Having foam on hand in certain strategic locations throughout the community is very important, and something that Weld County is doing and has been doing for years, and something that I believe Larimer County should look to involve themselves in. You know, there could be a requirement for new oil and gas development to help supply local firefighting districts with equipment needed to be able to fight oil and gas fires. I think that that's only fair, and ensuring that those foam trucks and foam units are available in places where they may be needed throughout Larimer County, and sharing with Weld County only makes sense. So I'm going to just pause there because there are some, kind of want to tee up the discussion that we're going to be having next week. And I think at this point, Leslie, we could probably take some public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we have 58 people watching as attendees. And so it's great that you all are here. We would ask that you raise your hands if you're interested in making a comment. And when you do start to speak, we'll unmute you. And if you could state your name, and if you live in Larimer County, and an affiliation, if you have one, just by way of introductions, and then provide your comments or questions at that point. We will take notes for that as well. You can also provide some comments in the chat box if you prefer to do that in writing versus speaking. So those are a couple of options for everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my notes screen here to make sure that that is working before we jump in.
Just real quickly, do we want to, because we still had a couple other things to cover, do we want to limit this portion to maybe half hour, 40 minutes and see where it's going, and then move on to other topics if we need to?
Yeah, Matt, if you think that it would be helpful to do a quick overview of some of the procedural items before we move forward to public comment, we could do that too. It's up to you, and then we can open it up, because I think your piece is relatively short, right? Yeah. I'm going to be brief. I don't have a lot to add. I think the one thing that I did notice, and this was both when Larimer County was adopting regulations last year, and even this year, as people started reviewing our current regulations, some of the confusion that comes up between reading our regulations versus maybe Boulder County or Commerce City or Adams County or another place is people look at it and say, well, what's the public process for this, and how do I get involved? It doesn't seem to be that Larimer County has any kind of a process in place. There is in a couple places in the Section 17 regulation citations that say refer to a different section of our land use code for those references. So for instance, and I don't want to create a lot of confusion here tonight, the county is rewriting our land use code right now too. So some of those sections are going to change a little bit, but in our current code, Section 12 outlines the public process for a special review application for which all oil and gas operations will be subject. So a special review application, for instance, according to our code, it requires a series of steps. And the first of those steps is what we call a sketch plan application. And the sketch plan application is kind of what it sounds like. Somebody submits a proposal and it's administratively reviewed to determine if that plan is on the right track for following our rules or not, or is it way offline with things. And that could easily become an alternative analysis section for us in the future. But that sketch plan process, when they submit it to the county, the first thing we do is send it out, notice out to our property owners in the area. And according to our current regulations, that's a half-mile notification. So from the location of the pad site or the property for which the pad site's on, we'll notice a quarter mile out, and we'll ask the public,
hey, we've received this application. Do you have any initial comments? So there's the first opportunity for the public to be engaged. That's almost at the exact same time we become engaged with the oil and gas industry on their projects. Once that sketch plan process is complete, and complete is when we meet with the operator and we say, here's what we found out. You're going to have to go through these steps, and you need to provide whatnot information in addition to what you're already talking to us about. Between that sketch plan stage and the next application stage, we actually require a neighborhood meeting. And so now the oil and gas operator is going to have to step out, and they're going to have to work with the county. We do the notification to make sure that it touches our residents. Again, we're going to do a 1/2 mile notification, and we're going to notice a meeting in which the oil and gas operator gets to meet with the public. We'll be in attendance as observers to explain what they're doing and to take public comments. So there's the second opportunity that the public gets to participate in this process. And we still haven't had a formal application. Following that neighborhood meeting, hopefully the operator makes certain modifications to their application and makes responses to the concerns that were raised. And they come in and they submit a public hearing application. And that's exactly what it sounds like. This is the phase in the development where we're going to seek public approval from the Board of County Commissioners ultimately. And the way that process works is the applicant makes a submittal to us. And again, as soon as they make that submittal, we're going to send out a notification to our residents. And we're going to say, hey, the application has now come in. You can look at our new information that has been submitted, and you can provide us additional comments based upon that new information that's been submitted. And we'll go through a series of evaluations in that process with various entities, our health department and our engineering department and the Division of Wildlife and the fire department and all the different agencies that can be involved in it, as well as the public gets to comment throughout that process. At some point in that process, we will set a time frame, and we will go to the Planning Commission with an application to say to the Planning Commission, do you support this application? At that time, we'll provide you another notification, and we'll say, hey, the public hearing's on this night. We invite you to come in to participate in that meeting and to engage our Planning Commission and tell them what your thoughts are about this application. And at the end of the evening, the Planning Commission will make a recommendation based upon all the testimony they took that evening as to whether or not the application should be supported or not supported, whether it should have conditions or no conditions. And then we'll repeat that entire process, but we'll do it with the Board of County Commissioners. So we'll write another notice that says we're having a hearing on such and such a date. The public will be invited to attend the meeting. We'll have presentations. The public will be able to voice their concerns to the commissioners, and the commissioners will take testimony. And at the end of that meeting, the board will make a decision if the application is going to be approved or not approved. And so the public hearing process has a fair amount of public input and participation in it. And the difference with Larimer County versus some other rules that are out there being looked at right now is we just don't define that in that process of oil and gas regs. We define that somewhere else in our code. And I didn't want you to think that we were ignoring the process and not having an open and transparent process for everybody to look at. So that is there. I would mention that I think that, the state created this alternative analysis process, and I would hope that part of the conversation is, when should there be an alternative analysis done at the county level? Maybe that's at the very onset of a project where the applicant comes in and lays out, here's the options that I did, and we can take a quick look at that and see what that's happening. So there's some of those things. The community outreach plan that Matt was referring to in his presentation, I would note that that's a little bit different than notification of public hearings and those types of things. That's more of a plan for long-term notification. So if an oil and gas operator was approved for something and they were having activity on their site because they've already developed it, and maybe they had a leak, or maybe they had some sort of activity that they were going to go in and repair some equipment or whatnot, they would provide a notice, and that public outreach plan would say, how do you notice the public to let them know that we're doing some work on site, so that people aren't alarmed by new activity occurring in the area and maybe dissipate anybody's concerns on that. So that's kind of our public hearing process. It's outlined in section 12 of our code, and our code is changing, so it'll be a little bit confusing. I would, what I'll do is post the special review process online so that you can look at that process and understand how that works. Lastly, I wanted to just talk about two things that were on the list tonight to be discussed, and that was potentially operator registrations and notification. And so currently our notification process is 2,650 feet for oil and gas operations only. And so I kind of went over where we're going to be providing those notices. But right now it's a half mile. We can always discuss whether or not that's adequate or inadequate. That will be open up for discussion. But I did want to note that currently Larimer County does not require a operator to register with the county that they are potentially going to do work or that they have facilities in the county. And the state does require that. And I think that it would be beneficial if the county considers putting in a registration process that requires all oil and gas operators that are going to do business over the next 5 years or so in Larimer County to provide notification of their intent, and to maybe provide a generalized plan of what their future looks like, so that we have some prediction to say, hey, we're looking down the pike and we can understand what's coming at us in the future. And so with that, I'm going to close that part of my conversation. I hope I didn't go on too long with that. And we're going to open this up for public comment. Leslie's going to take notes on the screen so you can see we're taking notes. I have a timer in my office that's set for 3 minutes. I'll let you know at about 30 seconds. We're not going to be real super strict with it, but try to wrap your comments up right around 3 minutes so everybody gets a chance to speak. And then if we have time after that, then we'll certainly open it up for more comments. Thank you again for attending this evening.
Okay, Matt, are you able to see the list on the screen or the notes with
Yes.
public comments? Yes, okay, so we currently have 6-7 people. I think there's a 7th since I typed this, with their hands up in this order. So we'll try to keep you notified if you're up next, or maybe the person after that. And I'm going to do my best to type as quickly as possible to catch the key themes that you say.
And I'm going to try to keep people coming on. So Bev Perina, you're now allowed to speak. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Bev Perina. I own Armadillo Property Management here in Fort Collins. Matt, I didn't realize what a huge process it is for them to even apply for the gas and oil permits. And so I think it's wonderful how you have all the different public community meetings and processes that they have to go through. You know, I think the general perception, excuse me, of an oil and gas company is that they take from the land and they really give nothing back to the community. And I think that the oil and gas people give a lot back to us and to our community. They definitely provide jobs, which are so necessary to keep our economy going. And along with that is the housing needs that we as property managers and realtors here in Fort Collins are able to provide. And so now we have folks that are either renting or owning, and now they're spending money in our town, and they're sending their children to school and becoming a part of that community, which we love. I consider them, my son worked for a small oil and gas company. I consider them a small business, and it was the company he worked for over in Weld County was all vet owned and vet operated. And I was excited to see my young man that had served our country able to work for this company in monitoring their wells in a very safe manner. And him coming home and explaining to me what his duties were in taking care of the wells that he was monitoring were amazing to me. I mean, their safety standards, their protocols, their ethics, their integrity was outstanding to me in what they were doing. We need to take a good hard look at how these regulations will affect these small businesses. And I feel that they are a small business. As we recover from the pandemic, we need to support our oil and gas industry so that we can recover as a community and get on with our lives. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you, Bev. Appreciate you taking the time. Okay, it looks like I'm going to shut off Bev here. And Andrew, you are now allowed to talk. Gudmundson.
Pretty close. Andrew Forkus Goodmanson.
Thank you.
There we go. One of these days I will have talked to you enough that it'll be rolling right off the tongue.
There you go.
So with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Andrew Forkus Goodmanson. I'm the Deputy Director of the League of Oil and Gas Impacted Coloradans. I do not live in Larimer County. However, I work with quite a few people who do. I feel for you taking live notes, Leslie. This is my absolute worst nightmare, typing in public. I have previously submitted earlier today an email to the county commissioners, and I copied several staff folks, Matt, Leslie, Matt Sura, that had a comparison document that myself and my colleagues put together, looking at 7 different jurisdictions' approach to oil and gas regulations. So I'd like to thank Matt Sura and Matt Lafferty and whoever else at the county worked on your comparison. I know that that is no easy feat. The amount of work that goes into that is seriously extensive, and I want to thank you for your work. I'd like to, in this first 3-minute round of comment, basically just say that I think there exists a pretty excellent set of regulations somewhere in the state of Colorado that is an amalgamation of the best of what other jurisdictions have done. I think a lot of really excellent work has been done in the whatever it's been, 1.5 years, nearly 2 years now since SB 181 was signed into law. The mission change rulemaking at the COGCC served an important purpose for the commission in drafting new rules, but it also served an important purpose for the public and local governments in that it generated quite possibly thousands of pages of evidence about the impacts of oil and gas operations and the potential solutions to those problems. And a lot of local governments have built on that. And I'm really encouraged by what I've been hearing lately from Larimer County with the work that you plan on doing. I think, as Mr. Sura described, there are certain areas where the state is doing an effective job already, and there are certain areas where Larimer County is uniquely suited to build upon that. The document that I shared with you earlier today has what I think are some of the strongest examples of oil and gas regulations in, I want to say, 7 or 8 key areas, including siting, air quality monitoring, my least favorite of something, nuisances and everything. And am I at 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll wrap up with that then and ask to maybe come back to me after everybody else has had comments if we have time, because I really appreciate this opportunity for dialogue.
Yep, very good. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you for that analysis. It was well put together. I appreciate it. Is it Brad Tidd now? Let me promote you to talk. Okay, sir, you're free to talk.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I'm a recently retired small business owner here, retired from IBM and now do investment and other businesses. in Larimer and throughout Colorado, and actually other states as well. I buy hundreds of acres at a time, as well as, you know, just houses. And the arbitrary changing of rules, regulations, and whatnot that impacts investment property is a great concern to people like me, because, you know, you could destroy my business, just flat out bankrupt me. That would affect, you know, not only me and my family, but the other people I hire, you know, my mom, who I take care of, that I'd have to push out onto the public dole and stuff like that. Something I do not want to do. I appreciate the clarity that you're using on this. I'm just worried that we're trying to duplicate processes that are already there at the state level, because that does nothing but slow down a business. I would like to see proof of a value add for having it at the local level as well as the state level. You know, what there, for any, having done a business all my life, for any investment process, you should have a known return on investment value for that process. And I would really like to see that for all these regulations. You know, what does the public get out of it? You know, something more than it makes us just feel warm and fuzzy. So, also cheap energy is a huge boost to any economy worldwide, and especially high-tech economy like the US. So whatever we do to raise the cost of, you know, gas, oil, electricity. I mean, I have solar on my house because it's just smart, and I think it's a good thing to do. But you know, all these things should be enforced. You can't get by with just one thing. You know, we have to look at the whole thing. So I appreciate your time and my ability to speak. So thank you, and I'll be watching and reading.
Thank you, Mr. Tidd. Appreciate your comments. Harold Gossi.
I am now unmuted. My name is Harold Gossi. I'm a retired oil and gas attorney. So I'm from the belly of the beast, so to speak. My wife and I live in Southwest Loveland, in a place that we love dearly. I actually did some work in Larimer County, drilling some wells across from Johnstown and south of Highway 14. I also represented basin exploration for many years. The principal party of that company was Michael Smith, whose name is prominently displayed on the Colorado State University football stadium. The people in our industry, oil and gas industry, are some of the best people in the world. They love their community. They roll up their sleeves when there's things to be done. They volunteer, they contribute. It's a good industry. And we've seen over the years significant changes in the amount of regulation that have been imposed on the industry. And the industry has participated in that process. It's a legal industry. It's just strategic industry. It provides jobs and taxes and income and benefits to everybody. A lot of the issues that we were talking about on the regulation and reporting have changed over the years because of the way the industry has changed from horizontal drilling, which is the current technology, from the vertical drilling 20 and 30 years ago when I was involved. So I just ask that the county take into account some of the losses that can occur and some of the risks that it's taking by trying to overregulate. And I'm sure that responsible, thoughtful discussion about these issues will come up with a good result. And thank you very much for being given the opportunity to address the commission.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. All right, next up, Robert Moraine.
All right. My name is Robert Moraine. I've lived in Larimer County for about 40 years now. And I personally feel it's been the best place to live in Colorado.
We can hardly hear you, sir.
Let me see if I can fix that. Give me a moment. Is this any better?
A little bit.
All right, let's try that. As I say, I've lived in Fort Collins and Larimer County for 40 years. I feel it's probably the best place in Colorado to live, largely because of the county's focus on fostering economic development, maintaining reserves to respond quickly and effectively to emergencies, and also maintaining policies to protect the environment. It's really a delightful place to be. But all of these require a robust economy. And as we've seen by numbers already shown tonight, Larimer's oil and gas industry contribute very significantly to the local economy and to the general state tax revenues. I own a small business and I also rent out a small property. I'm personally concerned that any adverse impact on our local economy will infect both of those sources of income for me. We've already seen very serious economic slowdowns during this past year. And I think we really need to be sensitive to those who will be impacted by any decisions the county may make in this area. I hope as a county, we'll be careful to avoid unintended consequences of making it excessively difficult for the oil and gas industry to continue to contribute to our well-being. For those of us who hope to see Colorado transition to a more reusable energy source, we will require a strong economy to pay for the research, the development, and the deployment of those new technologies. We need to be very careful not to cut things off too quickly before we're able to replace them. I'm really, really proud of the county. As has already been shown, we have some of the most stringent and protective regulations already in the state and even in the nation, which of course means in the world. And I think we need to be very careful about going overboard in a way that may adversely impact us instead of help. So I appreciate all the serious attention that's being paid to this issue. And I hope all sides will be balanced in the decisions that are made. Thanks very much for the time to speak tonight.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Gayla Martinez, you are now allowed to speak.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Gayla Martinez. And I want to thank you again this evening for this opportunity, for all the information you're providing us with. And special thanks to Matt Sura for the comparison charts and some of the other information that you sent out earlier this week. It's very helpful. I would like to start with that first graph showing production levels and just comment on the fact that although Larimer County is far from being at the top in terms of production, cumulative impacts are very high for us because of our location to the west of Weld County. And so we need to take this into consideration that particularly our air quality is already being seriously affected by what's happening around us. And I think that should give us extra reason to be very careful about how much more we want to worsen our own air quality by allowing for more oil and gas production here in Larimer County. I would also mention the fact that one of the things that I think is frequently overlooked in the analyses are those non-monetized costs that come with the oil and gas production. Air quality, water quality, impacts of soil and many other things. We're starting now to talk about those things, but we haven't put a dollar sign on them. And so if we're going to talk about economic benefits, we also need to talk about the economic costs that have not yet been considered. I was interested in looking at Boulder County's regulations that when it comes to electrification requirements, they have very strong requirements that the machinery should be electrified. And if for some reason it's absolutely impossible to access that electricity, they ask the company to provide some offsets. Now, I think this is a good start in the direction of looking at all the costs and then trying to compensate for those costs that are there that in the past we've overlooked. I fully support this idea of using some of the specific planning documents that the state has and either improving them or at least recording them in our own county documents, because I think that improves transparency. It's difficult for most people to go into the COGC website and look through that huge volume of regulations, find what we're looking for. So having that information more accessible to citizens of Larimer County, I think is an excellent idea. And I thank you for that. Also, very quickly, when it comes to the public meetings, neighborhood meetings, I noticed that in Commerce City, they specifically asked that where there was a 5% or more population that did not speak English, that translation of the announcements would be provided, as well as interpretation and childcare at any of the public meetings that would be held. I thought that was a really good suggestion. So as has been said previously, we have an excellent opportunity right now to garner all these ideas that are developing around the state and different local governments and combining them so that Larimer County can be really proud of having the best regulations in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayla. Steve Shagri.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you, commissioners, and I appreciate you providing us this forum to address our concerns. I've resided in Colorado for the past 7 years, 5 of which I spent in Fort Collins. 2 years ago, recently purchased a house in Windsor, and that's now where I reside. A little bit of my background, I have spent 16 years in the oil and gas industry as a pipeline, refinery, and compressor station integrity inspector. I'm one of the last people that will sign off before a refinery, compressor station, or pipeline goes into service. To touch on health and safety, because it seems to be at the forefront of everyone's mind, I'd like to make the commissioners aware that there has never been one documented instance of groundwater contamination resulting from drilling or hydraulic fracturing. Fracking and drilling both occur miles below the water table after the well has been cased. And I would also like to refer the commissioners to a report published by former Chief Medical Officer Dr. Larry Walk of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Safety that recommended that a 500-foot setback was more than sufficient and that no immediate action should be taken or was required at the time. Now, I'd also like to discuss revenue. The oil and gas industry in Colorado contributes 1 billion per year to state coffers, 600 million of which is allocated for public education through schools. And that makes up 81% of the distributions given out by the school trust. Now, jobs. Oil and gas contributes around 200,000 jobs in this state, both directly and peripherally. Things like car dealerships, grocery stores, small businesses. We purchase homes here. We hold a lot of fundraisers with the money raised going to those in need. And we're very happy to do that. It's our way of giving back to the community. Now, I would like to bring back to light what happened in Firestone about 2 years ago.
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. That tragedy while very unfortunate, was deemed by authorities to be the fault of the housing contractor for not making his 811 call before beginning excavation operations, which by state law you are required to do. I guess, oh, and I would like to address air quality, as someone mentioned before.
Real quick, you got 10 seconds.
I'd like to address air quality before I'm done. Completed wells and in-service wells emit absolutely zero, and that is not hyperbole, that is fact. You are in no danger of methane, whether it be biogenic or thermogenic. Now, I understand that
Thank you, Steve.
some people, thank you.
If we have more time at the end of the meeting, you're more than welcome to log back on and give us some more comments.
Thank you, sir.
Just want to make sure everybody has equal time. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Peter Cunningham, and then Deb Bajork after that. Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter Cunningham. I'm a 60-year resident of Larimer County in Fort Collins. My family were original pioneers of Fort Collins. I have 6 kids, one of whom, her entire family is involved in oil and gas production. Now that's her husband, her son, and his wife. Oil and gas production has provided them with good, solid, steady jobs and good income, which put a roof over their head, food on the table, tires on the car, shoes on the kids, braces on their teeth, and trips to the doctor. That same income was spread to small businesses, restaurants, grocery stores, gas stations, auto mechanics, and the like. That disposable income that they earned fed a lot of small businesses in their area. Now, they were able to purchase houses, as you know, no small feat in Larimer County, and especially in Fort Collins, because they had good jobs. Those good jobs were provided by the oil and gas industry. Curiously enough, my daughter charges her Tesla with electricity provided by a coal-fired power plant. Her husband fills his work truck with diesel fuel. They heat their home with natural gas. They run their snow blowers, lawnmowers, chainsaws, and the like with gasoline, all produced here in Colorado. More importantly, they appreciate the fact that there are regulations protecting air, water, and soil. Quite frankly, we're all going to breathe. We all have to drink. And many of us are eating products that are grown right here. So it's important that there is that collaboration between industry and government. It's important that both sides find a balance And I think you've done a good job thus far in trying to do that. I personally appreciate the fact that you're collaborating with industry and they with you. They're willing to do what needs to be done.
30 seconds.
So in conclusion, I'd like to say you have regulations in place and it'd be nice to see if they're adequate before we pile on a whole host of new ones. Perhaps we're looking for a solution is looking for a problem that may or may not exist. But I appreciate the fact that you're putting a lot of time and effort into it. I appreciate the fact that you collaborate with industry. And more important, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. Deb Bajork.
Thank you. I'm Deb Bjork.
Sorry, I messed that up, Bev. Bev, can you raise your hand again? I lost Bev altogether. As soon as she logs back on, we'll let her come back on. We'll go ahead and move forward with Janice Lynn.
Hello, my name is Janice Lynn. I'm a lifelong Coloradoan, currently living in Larimer County. One of my major concerns about oil and gas development in this region is it has to do with the water. I think we're looking at reduced water supply in because we're in a big drought at the moment. And even though you wouldn't know it because it snowed so much. But I went to one of the regulation meetings last year, and a couple of people came from what I think was the Wellington Oil operating company. And I was kind of concerned that they actually released their produced water into the Box Elder Creek alluvium, which at the time when they testified in front of the commission is actually legal in the state of Colorado. But I want to know if they monitor what happens to the groundwater near there and the land and also the nearby water sources. Because I have friends in the north part of the county who farm in that area and grow meat and other things for local consumption. So if you can answer me that question, I would appreciate it. Again, that's just how they monitor that release into the alluvium of Box Elder Creek.
I'd have to get back with you on that. I'm aware that they have special approvals from the state. They drilled many of those wells as water wells and not as oil wells, and are allowed to do things underneath that. And the Water Quality Control Commission down there gets to deal with some of that work. So I'll have to get back with you on how that all occurred.
Okay, how would you, would you like me to send you an email or something, or what?
Sure. And we have records because part of them went through our process for approval, but we can look into it and try to understand what's going on with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Anything else that you would like to add?
No.
Okay. Deb Bajork, you are now allowed to speak again. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's try this again. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I'm Deb Bjork. I'm a 30-year resident. I appreciate being able to talk tonight. And I also appreciate your attempt to create a comparison table of various oil and gas regulations that have been completed since emission change rulemaking was done. However, I would note that because the Larimer County current regulations intent and purpose section does not
prioritize protection of public health, safety, welfare, and the environment and wildlife, that undermines every area of the Larimer County regulations. So while there were parts of the regulations that were purportedly exceeded the mission change COGCC regulations, that I think that kind of undermines that. However, I trust that will be greatly improved as you revise. SB 181 made it very clear that protection of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife is the priority over development of oil and gas. As such, I would also ask that you tweak your table that you created to change the words strict to protective, which I think is more in line with SB 181 and mission change rulemaking. I would also like to respond to some of the other people who have spoken today. The PSR, which is the Physicians for Social Responsibility, of which I'm also a member, has 1,800 studies that show that oil and gas and fracking has impact to human health. And in fact, they have said there's no way to do fracking that is protective. Our air quality, we have an F from American Lung Association, and we have a serious indication from the EPA on surface ozone. I have asthma. My 2 sons have asthma. 3 of my 5 grandchildren have asthma, and it is absolutely incorrect to say that our air is clean here. A great percentage of it comes from oil and gas, and we know because we have more and more good air quality monitoring that shows what leaks, spills, releases is doing to our air quality. So I would appreciate our regulations being made as strong as they can. And we have the state regulations that we must, at a minimum, meet. And we hope that you go stronger to protect us. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. We appreciate your comments. Tim Gossi, you are now allowed to speak.
Good evening, Commissioner, staff, and Matsura. I'm Tim Gossi, coming up on a 26-year resident of Larimer County, small business owner and person that's very concerned about the environment and the environmental crisis. I would add and kind of join with Andrew from Logic about there's an amalgamation of all the good counties out there and the good pieces of their legislation that we should be shooting for. And I think the reasons for that are a few of the people have already talked about that. We have some of the worst air quality in the country. Fort Collins is 19th out of 229 metropolitan areas for air quality. A big part of that is the oil and gas development and part of Weld County. And so when we talk about quality of life, air quality, cleanliness of our environment, addressing the climate crisis, we really need to address this from a standpoint of very protective oil and gas regulations. I would add that some of the callers have talked about the good neighbor part of oil and gas and all the jobs and all the tax base that they provide, and that's great. I understand that. But in the energy space, 2 to 4 times more new jobs are being created in sustainable energy type jobs. So if we want to bolster our economies, we really want to make sure that we are mindful of who's creating the new jobs in that space, along with the benefit of us getting that clean energy, sustainable future that we all need. And I hope even industry folks will say they want as well. So I would urge the commission, the county commissioners, and I would urge people on this call to be thinking about the setbacks from the now oil and gas regulations being just 1,000 feet. Those need to be bolstered to 2,000 or 2,500 feet. Air quality monitoring needs to be paid for by monitors by the oil and gas industry. And I think we need to address our regional air quality and having air quality monitoring 24/7, 365 that is reported by a third party to the public in real time, so we can address some of the oil and gas and Weld County issues that are going on there. So I would say that that we need to really be protective. We really need to be thinking about some of the other great counties and all the good things that they put forward in oil and gas regulations, and that we're thinking about, if we really want to address the climate crisis that we know we need to, that we need to think about this from an economic perspective, and those clean energy, sustainable jobs is where we're going to get that. So I appreciate the process. I appreciate everybody listening and the ability to speak to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gosar. Melinda Ford, you're now allowed to speak.
Hi, I'm Melinda Ford. I'm a native to Fort Collins and have lived here for 50 years. I'm not associated with anything oil or gas industry, but I have family and friends that work or have worked in the oil and gas related industries and have been affected by new regulations. I am also a concerned citizen. I believe that the oil and gas industry is vital to our local economy, both as a source of revenue and also as a large employer. New regulations in Colorado have already affected my nephew, who worked in the oil and gas related industry. The company that he worked for ended up shutting down the site where he worked because of the loss of contracts with those in the oil and gas industry because of the increased regulations and the implementation of moratoriums on new permits. My nephew has a family of 6 that he supports. The sudden loss of his employment caused many difficulties for his family, especially since his wife had just almost died while giving birth to their 2nd son. They had large hospital bills and other expenses they are struggling to pay with the sudden loss of their primary source of income. I also have a friend whose husband works in the oil and gas industry. The new regulations requiring 2,000 feet setbacks is affecting the company that he works for. These new regulations are making it so that the only places that meet the criteria is on federal land, and getting permits to drill there is not happening. This means that the oil and gas industry will likely dry up in the next 5 to 10 years. And the knowledge of this has made my friend and her husband take a very long, hard look at his career. They are strongly considering leaving the area and moving out of the state, and him changing his career. They have a young family and were considering buying a home in Larimer County, but have now changed their minds. So it's causing some issues in the housing industry as well. These policies affect everything in our economy, including the housing industry, tax revenue, public school funding, and even local charities. I think we also need to keep in mind that the petroleum industry, the oil industry, provides many other products that we use on a daily basis besides just fuel. It's something that we need and use on a regular basis. Lastly, I want to say that we need the oil and gas industry because, as nice as it sounds to have renewable energy sources, they are simply not reliable, and oil and gas is. Until the time that we have other energy sources that are proven reliable and in place to replace oil and gas, then we should not force oil and gas industry out of business. We need them. Thank you.
Yes, am I unmuted now? Yes, am I unmuted now? Oh, thank you. Yeah, my name is Ben Trujillo. I've lived in Loveland, Colorado for over 40 years now. And for 39 of those years, I've been self-employed, run a small business. At the most I ever had was 2 employees. But Loveland has been very good to me. But every time that gas prices go up, I am very much affected. And each time that prices for home heating, I'm not just affected, everybody in this community is affected. And furthermore, energy costs affect everybody in every way, every single day. And the only way to keep prices down, there's only two ways. You either have the supply of energy that goes up for some reason, or you have competition to deal with the amount of energy that's out there available. Now, I don't know anything about the production of gas or oil, but I do know that every time I pay for anything at the pump or when I pay my utility bills, I know that I'm affected, and I know that everybody else is affected also. I don't care whether you're buying a pencil or you're buying food for your family or you're buying gas for your vehicle or you're heating your home, it affects everybody. And it seems to me that one of the ways to keep prices down is within the limits of safety and health. We need to keep regulation down. The one thing I have learned being in business is that regulations are absolutely a driving force to decide whether your business even exists, never mind thrives. So I thank you very much for listening, and I would appreciate very much that you would consider that if there are already regulations at another level, that it is unfair to put extra costs upon an industry which makes it less competitive. And I would also like you to realize and remember that the oil and gas companies do not pay for those regulations. Not really, because every cost they have, they must pass on to us. I think my time is up, and I thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Trujillo. Let's now go to Randy Kreider, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Randy Kreider, and I really want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you tonight. I've been a resident of Fort Collins and Larimer County for over 43 years. I've been employed by small businesses and very large businesses in the area. I've also started and run my own business with my wife for 30 years. My motivation for speaking to you tonight is not to make a case, is to make a case for freedom to do business, large or small, in Larimer County. The small business person's ability to pursue their dream of independence by growing their own business has been paramount to the success of our country and remains so today. I was living in Northwest Arkansas in 1967 and shopped in Sam Walton's first Walmart in Rogers, Arkansas. We cannot build enough wind turbines, install enough solar farms, and manufacture enough high-tech batteries to eliminate the need for oil and gas. I've been in the solar energy business. I know there's a place for sustainable energy sources, and I applaud the advances that have been made in recent years. But at the same time, I commend the oil and gas industry, which has continued to climb higher and higher mountains of regulations while still innovating and improving and remaining productive. So we should all recognize that the table is big enough for alternative energy, oil and gas, small business, and large business. So as leaders of Larimer County, I ask you to help us build a climate of cooperation and balance in this time of extreme emotion and exclusion. Thank you again.
Thank you, Randy. Appreciate your comments.
Mm-hmm.
Doug Henderson, you're allowed to speak now.
Hi, Leslie and Matt. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm Doug Henderson, a resident of Larimer County. And I think my comments, I'd say one of the things about science is that it's based on a continuous assessment and reassessment of expanding information about our world. And as our understanding changes, we also had to develop new public policies. And the reason that the state and local governments are undertaking policymaking is because our understanding about the oil and gas impacts on us and the environment is changing. So what we understood in the 1970s, 80s, 90s is very different from what we understand today. We know that oil and gas has a huge impact on public health, on safety, on people's welfare, and on the environment. And the body of evidence about this is growing, and we need to pay attention to this body of evidence. If we ignore science, what else do we believe? Voodoo? So I would say that Larimer County needs to take science into and the evidence about impacts of oil and gas into serious consideration in this process of revising its regs. That many of us in Larimer County don't want to breathe bad air, see billions of gallons of water damage, see spills, accidents, fires, explosions, which happen so much. We have a lot of concerns about the oil and gas industry and the impacts that are. The last few days, our air quality has been so bad that we had the same air quality as Mumbai, India, which has some of the worst air quality in the world. And we know, science tells us that the oil and gas industry in the Front Range is a major contributor to our air quality problems in the Northern Front Range. It's the whole Front Range, but it's the major contributor to ozone in the Northern Front Range and other problems. So this is not hocus pocus. This is science. We know it, and we need to address it. And Larimer County needs to take this into consideration. The primary concern here is protecting public health, safety, and the environment, both for current residents and for the future. So I hear the people in the oil and gas industry talking, but the general public is concerned about protecting public health, safety, and the environment. And we encourage the county to do that in the upcoming process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Badesky.
Yeah, hi, good evening. This is Mary Badosky. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I appreciate the information tonight. The comparison chart is very helpful to see. I appreciate that information. I just wanted to maybe ask a question, if that's possible. Mr. Lafferty, you said that all oil and gas applications will now have to go through special review with the county. And I'm just wondering, because as I was involved in the original process of the regulations, I felt there was some confusing language in the applicability section. And I just wondered, are all the pending permits that now will have to reapply going to have to actually go through the county process? The greenfield term is a little confusing, and I know we had a few recompletions that were pending as well. And so I'm just wondering if you can clarify, is that true that all applications will have to go through special review with the county, or will some of those only be going through the state? So that's my one question I had, and maybe that's for the attorneys involved, Mr. Sura and Mr. Haug. My other comment would be toward cumulative impacts. I think that's something that I would hope the county really looks at closely for our area, and determines what really is involved with cumulative review or cumulative impacts. How many wells are near a resident, the air quality, water impacts, cumulative impacts with water. So those are things that I hope the county will look at closely. And thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mary. And I'll just take this moment just real briefly to respond to your comment or your question. The Greenfield section will be discussed here in a little bit, not tonight, but on one of the sessions, we'll talk about what that reads and how to interpret that correctly or whatnot. But all the applications that were pending with the state as of January 15th were removed, and they'll have to reapply. And when they reapply, those are considered new applications, and they'll have to submit pursuant to the county's regulations as well. So they'll have to spin a special review and go through our process. Unfortunately, I don't know, maybe it's fortunate. I didn't mean unfortunately, but right now they can't submit because we're under a temporary moratorium, and that moratorium may be extended to the end of this adoption process. We'll find out about that on April 13th, as there will be a public hearing to discuss those matters. As far as recompletions, the state of Colorado considers those activities 2 permits, not 2A permits. So they're downhole permits, and we're not considering those as applications for new surface development. However, if a new 2 permit was to come forward and the county felt that it was creating a substantial new surface impact according to our rules, then we could apply that to that site. That would be things like new transportation impacts on the long term, maybe adding new equipment to the site, some of those things. We would consider that expanded use of that, and would likely ask them to go through our process of special review. So we'll continue to work on that subject. That's a great question, Mary, and we will try to focus on that a little later in one of the later sessions that we'll be going over this. Thanks. Okay, so we've gone through everybody. It looks like Nancy would like to add another comment. So Nancy, you're up. Nancy York.
Thank
You're still muted.
Got it. Good evening. I'm Nancy York, a longtime resident of Fort Collins. I had the privilege of serving on Fort Collins Air Quality Advisory Group for a number of years. So air quality is a particular interest to me. And I have been reading the studies, the recent studies, and they are abundant regarding the impacts, the health impacts of air quality, and particularly oil and gas emissions. And I second the previous speakers who have talked about the importance of curtailing as much of those emissions as possible. But I'm also interested in other things. One of the realities I have been looking at is about the economics of the oil and gas industry, and the number of bankruptcies. And just a little while ago today, I saw some research by Public Citizens that talked about the enormous subsidies the oil and gas industry have received just to stay afloat. They're one of the highestly subsidized industries in the country. And I do believe that we need to pay attention to it, because I hope that the county sees to it that when a company, that they will cover the cost of cleaning up their area, so that they plug the various, when a oil drilling stops, that they plug those holes, and that they will not leak, because we have an enormous amount of methane that is leaking, and that contributes to the climate warming, which is something none of us can look away from. So I'm glad that there's a 2,000-foot setback. I hope that the county does not compromise on that. And thank you very much for letting me speak, and for letting the others speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. All right. We're going to allow Ed Bean to talk next, and then we'll come to Andrew. Ed?
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. My name is Ed Bean. I am a resident in Fort Collins. 5 years in Fort Collins. Previously lived in the Boulder area for about 13 years. Spent about 15 years in the Gulf Coast region in Houston and Baton Rouge. So I am somewhat familiar with oil and gas activity in a regional basis. I appreciate the chance to provide some input as you go through the revision process here. Well, one concern I have came up as you were describing the process of public notification, Matt, and I'm kind of concerned if I'm understanding correctly that you're really only required to notify property owners within a half-mile radius of a given project, and it's clear that there are impacts well beyond that radius when a project like that goes in. And I would have concerns that if that's the limitation of public notification, I think that needs to be expanded. If that's not required by the state, I think it's something we should be looking at seriously here in Larimer County. I'm probably going to be speaking with you all again in the future, but that was the concern that came up out of tonight's session. Thank you.
Thanks. And Mr. Behan, the half-mile notification, it only applies to oil and gas in Larimer County. Everything else is 500 feet is what's required. So we treat it a lot differently, but certainly it's something that we could be looking at in the future.
Appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Okay, let's see if I can get it right. Andrew Forks Goodmanson.
That was better. The first one's for KISS. Imagine it was KISS at the end.
Okay, I'll get it right next time.
And then we'll get it. Yeah, it's the joy of modern families, right? So I've always empathized with Commissioner Shattuck McNally for that reason. So I'm really appreciative of this second sort of round of opportunities to comment. There's been a lot of misinformation shared during this presentation. In the interest of not getting into a back and forth with the commenters, won't go too far into it beyond saying wells emit methane their entire lives, the entire time. There's a mountain of evidence to that. You can look at your the state agencies of CDPHE and COGCC to indicate that. You can look to your neighbors to the south. Broomfield has been gathering air emissions data that indicates impacts from drilling wells, fracking wells, completing wells, flowbacking wells, producing wells, and now they're dealing with the issue with the Davis 43-6 well where a plugged and abandoned well is leaking. It's not the first time that's happened either. So with that being said, I think, sorry, I wasn't planning on addressing that during this comment and I got a bit distracted. So I would strongly encourage you to look to these agencies for information to back up the statements being made by the impacted community rather than people who have a vested financial interest in lax regulations on the oil and gas industry. So with that, I want to take whatever time I have left and talk about a few areas where I think Larimer County is uniquely suited to regulate more protectively than the state. And first is something that Mr. Sura covered extensively in his presentation, and that's the setbacks and reverse setbacks. Larimer County can look to the evidence presented by numerous parties in the mission change rulemaking and elsewhere for evidence to support at least a 2,000-foot setback. That has been done by several other Front Range local governments, and at least Boulder County is considering a structure like the COGCC with a hard setback and a soft setback, but their distances are 2,000 and 2,500 feet respectively. And actually, maybe a better use of my time here would be to say that I'm not going to ask you to simply say ditto to Boulder in your comments. I think there are some areas that Boulder does really well, and that is areas like pre-application information gathering. And I think that regardless of what numbers you want to put in your regulations, generating more information in advance of your decision-making process can only help you make better decisions. So I would strongly encourage you to look towards our comparison document for the pre-application information requirements and look to that to help inform your decisions. And then I look forward to continuing this conversation because, as I've made extremely clear in this presentation, there's a lot more to cover than you can get to in 3 or 6 minutes. So thank you for this, and good luck.
Thank you. Gayla Martinez.
Yes, well, as it turns out, Mr. Behan made the first comment that I wanted to make, and Mr. Forkus Goodmanson made the second comment I was going to make, so I will yield back this opportunity, but thank you.
Thank you, Gayla. Tim Gosar.
Hello, everyone. I actually posted a Bloomberg article about one orphaned well in California that spewed 30 tons of methane over its life. And there are millions of these kinds of wells all around the country and in Colorado. So I want people to be aware of the kind of devastation that can go on in the oil and gas business. And so I think it's a precursor to the financial assurance that we're going to get to at some point. I want people to be able to look at that article, and there are many more just like them about the devastation when we don't have appropriate financial assurance from these oil and gas businesses and operators so that they take care of that well from the time that they apply to the time that it's plugged and reclaimed, and from then on, actually. So I also would want to kind of go a little tangential and say that I think that people are important to note that people of Fort Collins passed a moratorium in 2014. Now, the reason we don't have that is because the Colorado Supreme Court overturned that. But I think that is when we start talking about regulation, we need to start talking about what's best for the most people. And I think when you talk about that, you have to factor in, not only do we have a temporary moratorium, and I hope that will be extended through the end of this process to get new oil and gas regulations protective for us, for the environment and wildlife resources. And I also think there is a absolute will to have very protective regulations that are akin to some of the best pieces of the different counties around the state. And so I think that moratorium that was passed in 2014 should be something we keep our eye on and keep in mind when we talk about this upcoming opportunity for new oil and gas regulations. So I just really appreciate everything that the staff has done, commissioners have promoted, and that the comparative analysis from Matt was super, and from Logic as well. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. That appears to be most of the comments. I know that Mr. Sura had a little bit more to a presentation that he wanted to add a little bit of conversation on. Did you still want to do that, Matt, and cover those last couple of slides?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. This is just gonna, I think, finish us off for the evening. I think we're okay to end at 8 if everybody else is okay with that. But I did have some things to tee up the conversation that we're going to have in 2 weeks. I believe it's in 2 weeks. Leslie, maybe you can verify that next meeting date. But we're going to be talking about planning processes and zoning tools and planning tools such as setbacks and alternative location analysis. And that date, I can pull it up if you can.
It's the 5th.
And it's April 8th. And what
Yeah.
we agreed that we would do is provide some materials a few days in advance of that meeting that everybody could start to review and provide some input to. So our work as a team here will be to take the feedback we've heard so far and that we've been hearing and start to create some different options that we can talk about at that meeting.
Leslie, can you unshare screen so Matt can share screen?
Yes.
Great, please. Thank you. And Stephen, we'll get to you in just a few minutes, sir. Okay, Matt.
Okay, so what you're looking at is the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission website. You can pull this up yourself. The only thing that I turned on the mapping tool is the horizontal wells, directional wells. As you can see, we've got Larimer County here. Weld County is to the east and Boulder County to the south. This mass of oil and gas development is more or less already drilled. Purple indicates wells that have already been drilled. Green wells are those wells that have been approved by the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission and have not yet been drilled. And light blue are those wells that were pending when the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission adopted new regulations. All of these in light blue are going to have to be reapplied for, and those applications are going to be due in July of this year.
Matt?
Yeah.
Can you point out real clearly north-south where the Weld County line is, that because
yeah, so here's
line.
this black line here is the county line. We've got I-25 here, and this is the city of Fort Collins, Windsor, Loveland, and I believe this is Berthoud.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to point out that a lot of that purple's in Weld County, and
that's in the, but it's all sort of centered for Larimer County's purposes. I think this is an important map to see, and frankly, I find maps really important generally when talking about oil and gas development, because you get a sense of where the development pressure is for oil and gas. Certainly, there's a resource in this general area called the Greater Wattenberg Field, where they have found some good success in drilling for oil, and that pressure just so happens to be in some of the more populated areas of Larimer County, which is Fort Collins, Windsor, Loveland, and Berthoud. It just so happens that that southeast quarter of Larimer County is where the oil and gas pressure is, and it's also where the populations are. So that's one of the issues that certainly we're going to be wrestling with over the coming month. This is also something to consider where there's a lot of public lands. Certainly, Larimer County has the ability to regulate any development that happens on public lands or on private property. But there's yet another entity. There's certainly going to be Larimer County is going to be regulating. Colorado Gas Conservation Commission is always regulating. And if it was to happen on public lands, there's going to be another entity, likely a federal government agency, the Bureau of Land Management, or other agencies that may be involved. This is what a 500-foot setback from homes looks like. If you were to, the red areas are those areas that would be potentially open for development, and this is only from homes. There are also other considerations, floodplains, any sort of wildlife habitat concerns, number of other issues that would be on top of this, but this is only looking at setbacks from homes. This is what it looks like, and as you can imagine, and as you would expect, most of the homes are located still on that southeast quarter of the eastern side of Larimer County, and there are very few locations. And if you go back to this map, some of those locations are actually protected areas, parks and whatnot. But so the holes that you're seeing may not be available at all, is my point. If you look at 1,000-foot setbacks, those start shrinking even more, as you would expect. And then 2,000-foot setback, that's even more so. And again, these are the types of maps and the analysis that the staff is going to be doing over time to craft some regulations that are going to be responsible, that are going to be based on science and based on, you know, what the impacts might be. And so we fully understand and have our eyes wide open as to what impacts will be from any regulations that we put forward. And then with that, I just a little preview for April 8th, and we look forward to speaking with you then.
All right, great. Looking back at our attendees list, there's one Stephen Shagri would like just another opportunity to speak, so I will unmute you. You're welcome to speak now, Stephen.
Thank you again. I would like to finish my statement from earlier. I ran out of time regarding methane. The methane released around well sites, and it's released anywhere that there is human activity, whether it be excavation for laying sewer lines, power transmission lines, home construction, is biogenic, which means that it is shallow subsurface and naturally occurring. You basically can't stop it from being released if there's human activity in the area. If active wells or in-service wells themselves were to release methane, it would be thermogenic, which is man-made, and it's easy to tell the difference between the two. I just wanted to make the commissioners aware of that.
Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate that final comment.
Yes, sir.
It looks like Lori Brunswig would like to say something. Lori, feel free to speak now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I just am wondering what, if anything, you guys knew about the CDPHE Regulation 42 that was granted, I guess, in 1999, which gives basically oil and gas a pass to dispense their toxic produced water in an area, a large area in north of Fort Collins, all the way to Weld County. And it even includes some of the city of Fort Collins in this large area. And I'm wondering if you could comment on that, please.
I think that was a similar question that came up earlier with regards to the Wellington Operating Company's discharges into the Box Elder alluvium as part of some operations up there. And that we're going to have to look into to get you a better answer on that, how that's regulated and whatnot. But we will look that up and try to post an answer on the webpage.
Okay, that would be great if I could hear that. Also, I don't think that we should have any oil and gas in the Larimer County because we are in an 8-hour ozone non-attainment area. So how are we justifying any production here in Larimer County due to that? And also, I would just like to say Weld County needs to stop polluting our air. And if you care about our health and our well-being here in Larimer County, I believe that you have an obligation to contact Weld County and make them stop. We can't keep this up anymore. And you know by the science that this bad air is coming from Weld County and not necessarily made here in Larimer County. So I just want to hear what you have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And again, we'll have to get back to you on that question. We don't regulate Weld County, so it'll be hard for us to require that, but maybe there's other opportunities in the future. Cody Jenneret. I hope I got that correctly. Cody?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. You did say that correct. Thank you. Yeah, no, there's been a lot of great discussion here. Just one point I feel is worth making as regulations are pursued here or considered is I don't think this can be taken with determining that green energy is going to replace the energy needs in our area. Referring to a study that was done by the Manhattan Institute in 2020 by a faculty member of Northwestern University, dug into the amount of energy and emissions it actually takes to just build one battery for a car. And due to that study, he's finding it's 10 to 100 times the energy and emissions over that life of that battery. That is production and then life in a car. So we can't forget the entire life cycle when considering the energy usage and the environment as we move forward. That's just one point when considering is that is not going to be the alternate solution as oil and gas will be around. It is needed, and the impacts of taking it away would be very significant on everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. It looks as though there are no other comments for tonight. I think Matt did a good job at pointing out that next couple of weeks on April the 8th, we will be coming back and having a presentation about land use and zoning tools, alternative siting analysis, setbacks and reciprocal setbacks, transportation systems and infrastructure relating to land use. And those include all encompassing some of the other things that are out there. And we're going to attempt to get some information together and post that online, as well as we'll try to send that out to you ahead of time so we get a chance to look at that. And then we'll have a similar conversation that evening around those topics. So that's what we want to focus on the 8th. I see each of the commissioners turn their screens back on, so they may be wanting to say something. So I will take a brief moment and I'll turn it over first to Chairman Commissioner Kafalis.
Thanks, Matt. I just want to say thank you to everyone who took 2 hours of their time out to participate. For us, the three of us, it's really important, as I said earlier, to listen to the public input, and we will undertake this process in a very thoughtful and deliberative way. It's been kind of hard to stay entirely focused on the discussion tonight when things are unfolding in Boulder and we're learning more, but we have to keep those folks in mind in our thoughts and prayers and continue the work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Stevens, was there anything you'd like to add? You're still muted. That's why I wanted to check, was to see. All right, I'm sorry about that. We appreciate you attending though and listening in tonight. Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
I just want to echo my colleagues' comments that we're thankful for the public participation tonight and appreciate the information and emails that you sent, and we are listening and taking everyone's comments into account. And I want to thank Matt Sir for the information he presented tonight, and Leslie and Matt, thanks for organizing this. Lori Cadridge as well. Thank you and Frank is here, and Jen and Leah. Appreciate everyone's, the staff's involvement. I know they put a lot of work and extra time into this, and just know that we're grateful, and this is important part of the process, and we appreciate everyone's participation. So thank you all, and thanks Commissioner Kafalis for recognizing the need to send our thoughts and prayers to those impacted with Boulder County tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Haug, I saw that you turned on your screen. Is there something you'd like to add? I saw a head nod no, so we'll leave it at that. Matt or Leslie, is there anything else that you'd like to add for this evening?
Not for me, just echoing thanks for everybody who participated and stayed on for a couple of hours.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your input and and for keeping it civil. And hopefully we can continue to work this way throughout this process. I appreciate your time, and we'll try to get things posted as quickly as we can. Thank you again. Have a good evening. Good night.